Hey, I'm David from University of Lisbon. I'm here talking on behalf of my colleagues Manuel, Pedro, João, and André. And today I'm presenting the work we've done in characterizing accessibility barriers in mainstream games, but focusing on how some blind gamers circumvent these barriers and find ways to enjoy titles that are mostly not made with them in mind. So, if you've seen the title of the work, you probably wonder what's a Zelda game. And to introduce this talk, I want to center on a game that you probably heard of, The Legend of Zelda. If you know this series of games, you know that they are highly dependent on vision, with complex maps and platforming challenges, making them seemingly inaccessible to someone who is blind. But the truth is that there are blind gamers who play this game and complete it with success. In this slide, I'm showing a clip taken from a YouTube channel where you can find various playthroughs done by a blind gamer. The clip shows the gamer playing The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask and exploring the map by swinging his sword multiple times, trying to hit the obstacles and the walls around him to actually get a sense of where he is. In this game, the player uses the sword not only to defeat enemies and stuff. He uses it as a virtual cane to perceive the world and orient himself. This player actually completed the game and posted the full playthrough on YouTube. And he's not the only one. There are many blind gamers out there who are playing mainstream games like Minecraft and Call of Duty and posting their playthroughs publicly in platforms such as YouTube and Twitch. Some research previously characterized blind players' experiences with audio games and other accessible alternatives. So in this work, we give a different perspective, focusing on their experiences with mainstream games, where challenges are mostly visual and involve some form of navigation. Our goal was to characterize the barriers that these players face and associated coping strategies in order to inspire new accessibility practices and more inclusive design. To achieve this goal, we conducted an online ethnographic study where we analyzed YouTube videos of blind content creators playing digital games. Our data includes dozens of videos uploaded by 14 content creators, covering a total of 40 mainstream games and over 70 hours of content. To analyze these videos, we employed a thematic analysis where all videos selected were annotated and then discussed to collaboratively identify themes. I refer you to the paper where you can find details about the methodology. So now I would like to give you a brief overview of what we found on these videos and provide some examples. For some games, the audio design was rich enough that essential information was conveyed in some form. In particular, most games observed make use of spatial audio that players can leverage to perceive the position and direction of elements, and footstep sounds and voice lines are also very important to convey the position and state of the characters. When players do not have access to all information needed, they usually act methodically on the environment to understand their surroundings. Like I mentioned before, one player using the sword as a virtual cane. In many games, we could also observe players bumping into obstacles to get a sense of the map layout. This is obviously not always possible, in particular when players are not able to freely explore at their own pace, like in combat segments. But by exploring the environment in this methodic way, blind players create a mental map based on specific sound landmarks, usually elements that emit a persistent sound effect, like a fire pit or a water stream, and then they can have a sense of position and orientation relative to these landmarks. For example, oh, there's a fire pit to my left. In this clip, I'm showing a user playing Zelda, navigating through a door by aligning the camera with the sound of the torches that are on each side of this door. In some games where players can build on the environment, they actually create new landmarks that facilitate navigation. For example, here in Animal Crossing, one of the users builds fountains to mark pathways and torches to mark entrances. Even when players find ways to get a sense of the environment, they usually find themselves unaware of the objective, as these are usually communicated through message prompts or markers that are solely visual. As such, it is common for players to get stuck in the same location for minutes on hand, or simply get lost. Some players would actually die on purpose or load a previous save to go back to a known location and then reorient themselves. Another thing is that players often struggle to understand verticality in the environment, and to quote one of the users, the main problem that I have with Left 4 Dead that makes it a lot more difficult is aiming vertically. Like, when I move left or right, the sounds rotate around me, but when I move up or down, they don't. Controls are not explained in an inaccessible way, and prompts for interaction are usually visual as well, so players have to experiment with different buttons and even repeatedly push them to check for interactions. When these interactions are involved in more complex challenges, it is very difficult to progress in the game. For example, when players have to take cover from enemies or approach them in stealth mode. We observe that even when there are auditory cues to indicate when players can interact, it can lead to cumbersome interaction, especially when these interactions need to be very precise. For instance, in this clip of The Last of Us Part 2, we can see one of the users trying repeatedly squeeze through a passageway, but not being able to do it because they need to position the character in a certain very precise way and have to interact in a very precise time frame. In some games, players rely on accessibility features that reduce the difficulty or even automate parts of the experience, like automatic steering in racing games. In this clip I'm showing here on this slide, there's a gameplay of Forza Horizon where the player is simply speeding up while the game is automatically steering the car for him. All these reduce the level of interactivity and challenge offered by the game and thus player agency. In the paper, we thoroughly discuss this tension between ensuring accessibility while still offering meaningful and challenging decisions to players. In videos where users were playing with friends and family, sighted players would also step in with additional cues and information, and the same happened when users were playing with a live audience. For instance, when live streaming, we could observe people on the chat giving indications and helping players navigate, like saying go left and turn right. One interesting style of gameplay that we observed was the co-pilot scenario, where the blind user would share a single-player experience with a sighted friend, and in these cases the two players would distribute the controls in a sort of equal split and take on different roles according to their abilities. Just to give an example, in Neverwinter, the blind player would be responsible for attacking enemies and using abilities, while the sighted co-pilot would navigate and describe the surroundings. Okay, now concluding, with this paper we call forth opportunities to shape the design of digital games toward welcoming both sighted and blind players to the medium. Obviously, there's much more on the paper, and we discussed new features that would improve accessibility, as well as how the design can also be improved to consider the needs of blind players. So I invite you all to read these on the paper. As a last note, I want to highlight one of our main takeaways, which is even when players play in a way that is maybe not expected or simply different from sighted peers, they must have the opportunity to join the experience and participate like everyone else. So we must integrate their playstyles and strategies even when these derail from the original intended experience, like, for example, giving the possibility to landmark the environment. On this note, I want to finish the talk with these words that resonated with me. So in the video, one user is playing Animal Crossing and he recognizes the extra effort he has to put into by using external tools and constant trial and error, but also cherishing the simple fact that he was able to join the conversation around this game. So in his words, it looks tedious, but the fact that I'm able to do something, it's simple, but I can't describe it other than normal. Because whenever a new game comes out, everyone's like, oh wow, it's so awesome. And I can't usually play it. But like, day one, I'm able to play this game. That's an experience I don't get to have very often. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for your attention.